Hey there, righteous people. What is up? Derek here from Bomb Socks with another day of Bomb Bites, where we feast upon the words of Christ, one bite at a time. So there's a question I want to pose to you as we're finishing up this next couple days of Bomb Bites. According to Joseph Smith, what subject is, quote, the most glorious of all subjects belonging to the everlasting gospel? Well, let me take you into section 128 and let me show you what Joseph taught here that shows what in his mind is the most glorious of all subjects pertaining to the gospel. It might not be what you think it is, but look at this here. So verse 1, and there's several verses in here. Verse number 1, it says, "As I stated to you in my letter before I left my last place," this is when he was in hiding, "that I would write to you from time to time and give you information in relation to many subjects. I now resume the subject," and he touched on this in section 127 a little bit, "of baptism for the dead, as that subject seems to occupy my mind and press itself upon my feelings the strongest, since I have been pursued by my enemies." Now, I think this subject is something that was on a lot of people's minds. You look at the Come Follow Me for this week, you're introduced to a woman by the name of Jane Nyman. Now it says, in August of 1840, a grieving Jane Nyman listened to the prophet Joseph speak at the funeral of his friend Seymour Brunson. Jane's own teenage son Cyrus had also recently passed away. Adding to her grief was the fact that Cyrus had never been baptized, and Jane worried what this would mean for his eternal soul. Joseph knew how she felt. He had wondered the same thing about his beloved brother Alvin, who also died before being baptized. So the prophet decided to share with Jane and everyone else at the funeral what the Lord had revealed to him about those who had died without receiving the ordinances of the gospel and what we can do to help them. So you can see back then, when someone had passed away, you had a family member or loved one pass away, and all for everything that you knew and had been taught, that person was lost. So you can see why this occupied people's minds. I mean, Alvin was a hero to Joseph. Everybody loved Alvin. Jane Nyman, loved her son Cyrus. So you can see why this is such a sensitive subject to people, because they're like, I don't want to know that my loved one is gone and I'm never going to see them again. So Joseph calls this the most glorious of all subjects. In fact, over the next few verses in section 128, he talks a little bit more about that. If you go down to verse number 11, he uses kind of a unique phrase. "Now the great and grand secret of the whole matter, and the summum bonum," there's a word that we use often. It's a Latin phrase that means the supreme good from which all others are derived, "of the whole subject that is lying before us consists in obtaining the powers of the holy priesthood. For him to whom the keys are given, there is no difficulty in obtaining a knowledge of facts in relation to the salvation of the children of men, both as well for the dead and as for the living." Look at verses 16 and 17. "And now in relation to the baptism for the dead, I will give you another quotation of Paul. 1 Corinthians 15:29, which many of you are familiar with, "Else what shall they do which are baptized for the dead, if the dead rise not at all? Why then are they baptized for the dead?" Verse 17, and again in connection with this quotation, I give you a quotation from one of the prophets who had his eye fixed on the restoration of the priesthood and the glories to be revealed in the last days, and in a special manner, here's where this original question that I brought up to you earlier, this most glorious of all subjects belonging to the everlasting gospel, namely the baptism for the dead. For Malachi says, last chapter, verses 5 and 6, "Behold, I will send you Elijah, the prophet, before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord. And he shall turn the heart of the fathers to the children, and the heart of the children to the fathers, lest I come and smite the earth with the curse." So here's Joseph who says this subject is the most glorious of all subjects. And I like in the verse where he says, "For Malachi says," and I think I've brought this up to you before, this phrase, "the hearts of the children will turn to the fathers," it is mentioned in every single standard work. You've got it in section 2, this section 128, you got it in Luke 1:17, Malachi 4, which we read there. Jesus came and quoted it in 3 Nephi 25, and Joseph Smith History, Moroni kept Joseph up half the night quoting this and other verses because of the significance of this doctrine. Because what you've now done is you're now creating hope for individuals that have lost lost people who have passed on before them, that you can now do work for that individual. And this is where the temple is such a key element to this. In Nauvoo is where they started doing these baptisms for the dead. And so that's where you start seeing this becoming such a powerful welding link between the generations. Now that phrase comes right from verse 18. I might have rendered a plainer translation to this, but it is sufficiently plain to suit my purpose as it needs. It is sufficient to know in this case that the earth will be smitten with a curse unless there is a welding link of some kind or other between the fathers and the children upon some subject or other. And behold, what is that subject? It is the baptism for the dead. For we without them cannot be made perfect, neither can they without us be made perfect. I love that statement. In fact, there's a cool picture in Come Follow Me for this week, and it's called simply Us with Them and Them with Us, that connection there. So again, you can see Joseph here. This is something that is exciting to him. A lot of exclamation points in these chapters because Joseph has been given hope here. You go back to the Come Follow Me. The doctrine of baptism for the dead thrilled the saints. Their thoughts turned immediately to deceased parents, grandparents, and other family members. Now there was hope for them. Joseph shared their joy. He used joyful, enthusiastic language to express what the Lord taught him about salvation of the dead. Let the mountains shout for joy, and all the valleys cry aloud, and all ye seas and dry lands tell the wonders of your eternal King. In fact, it's kind of fun. Jane Nyman, when she heard this story, she actually went and found a gentleman by the name of Harvey Olmsted. And she was just like, Harvey, will you baptize me for and in behalf of my son Cyrus who had passed away? So they went right out into, I believe it was the Mississippi River. They went right out to there. And Vienna Jacques, some of you may remember her back in, I believe it was section 90. Vienna Jacques was there, and she was riding a horse. And so she and the horse went out to the Mississippi River and witnessed this very unorthodox baptism as Harvey Olmsted, a priesthood holder, baptized Jane Nyman for and in behalf of her son Cyrus, who had passed away. Pretty unorthodox, but what was interesting is Joseph Smith, when he heard this, he wept. He was like, that is faith right there, and he declared it as a valid ordinance. So you can see the faith of these righteous individuals as they hear this doctrine. Tomorrow, I'm going to show you some modern day examples of how that is blessing people's lives. Hey, thanks for watching, thanks for subscribing, and thanks for sharing. Check out our amazing gospel themed socks at bombsocks.com, and you guys have an amazing day. Godspeed. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.